Happy Friday, guys, and welcome to another episode of Let's Talk Dubs. I'm your host, Bill T. Well, it's Friday, and you know what that means? Another podcast. And this week is a little different. I'm going to catch up with, let you know about the Diecast SuperCon that I went to this last weekend, as well as doing a little bit of a tribute today. Episode 29 of the podcast, I had Bob Lacoste on. And if you guys know, Bob Lacoste, our friend, passed away a little over a week ago. And so as a tribute to him, I took the podcast that we did, because that was in the early days of recording the podcast, and I ran it through an audio enhancer and really cleaned up the audio, so it's super good. I also, originally when I did that podcast, I videotaped it, so I do have the video content of it, and I'd like to get it edited and whatnot. It's just, everything's about making time. And so now that I've got the audio dialed in, I'm going to pair that up with the video eventually and release that. But today I'm going to re-release the cleaned up, edited version of the interview with Bob Lacoste. So you guys will have to go back and track down episode 29. And this is kind of the remastered version where the audio has been cleaned up, and it's really good, man. You know, I went back and listened to it after Bob passed away, and I just thought to myself, I'm so thankful that I have opportunities to record so much with people that have been impactful in our VW scene. And that we're able to save their history, man. So in unfortunate circumstances, when we all leave this place, there's something left behind. And so, you know, we're going to be listening to that today. So, but you know, before we get into that, I wanted to just remind you guys, don't forget to support our sponsors, VW Trends Magazine. Go subscribe today. A great magazine. Latest issue just came out just recently, so don't miss another one. Go subscribe today at VWTrendsMagazine.com, and also go check out our buddies, Ross Wolf. The guys over at Ross Wolf are always innovating and working on developing and bringing new products to market that are for the vintage speed style type performance enthusiasts. So check them out today. I know I got outfitted with some stuff for the chop top last time, and I just got some velocity stacks for the double cab. So if you got 48s and you want some good looking velocity stacks, they make them billet aluminum. You want Viton gasket seals, they've got the Viton gasket seals for your sump plate, and now they carry them for the push rod tubes. So go get some of the latest and greatest technologically advanced stuff through the guys at Ross Wolf. These are enthusiasts making parts for enthusiasts. So go check them out today at rosswolf.com. Well, let's drop this intro track, and I'll see you guys on the other side. Tell you a little bit about my experience at the Diecast SuperCon, and then we'll go ahead and listen to a good old story with Bob Lacoste from the compound on this week's Let's Talk Dubs.
You probably don't know that there's a new Volkswagen out that doesn't look like a Volkswagen. It's got everything that people who like the bug like.
Before we get into listening to the remastered version of episode 29, Bob Lacoste podcast, and I love the audio quality that came out on it this time, and it's super good. I wanted to get into, first I just want to touch bases. This last weekend I went to Diecast SuperCon show, went there with Zorba, and it was my first time at a Diecast convention, right? So they had it at the Ahern Hotel, and it was sponsored by Jada and House of Cars is the ones that put it on, and they had a bunch of celebrity signings and whatnot. Noel G, the guy that always plays Hector, the Mexican dude always plays Hector, a bunch of people like that. I got to go and see, you know, it's cool to see a bunch of the older celebrities and stuff there, but the coolest one was to see Ponch and John and, you know, the boys from Chips, and Eric Estrada couldn't be a nicer guy, dude. And same with Larry Wilcox. And so it was great getting to chat with those guys for a few minutes. And there was a ton of diecast cars. And, you know, a lot of us are into diecast indirectly because of our affinity for cars. People that know us and don't know what to get, like, oh, I'll just buy them a Volkswagen something, and usually they'll end up getting this little Volkswagen diecast. And if you guys have some of that stuff. Mine ended up in a big in a box, right? Like I was pinning some up on the wall, and then the sun coming through the windows made the plastic on it turn yellow, and some of those other issues like that. So I started putting stuff in a box. I'm like, what's the purpose of having this in a box? So when I went there, one of the things I was looking for was a way to display the Hot Wheels without, getting too crazy or something too complicated to put together or whatever. And I actually found a company called Mascar, and Mascar makes, they do a vacuum formed plastic panel that goes on the wall, and you can either display your cars on the card or you can display them out of the card, right? So they just have some where it's just, they have one, I think it holds 72 cars, and they have another one that it holds like 30 cars, I think, or something like that, 40 or 30 cars on the card. So the cards kind of slide and overlap, and they slide in these little channels, but they're pretty cool. And so I just put them up in my game room, and now all my cars are out of the box. And now I'm starting to sort them through. And what's funny is as I've been going through these die-cast cars that we collect, I was getting a lot of the Jada ones and a lot of the, Dub Riders or whatever they were. And they come in like these oversized blister packs and, plastic wrapped and all that stuff. So now I just started cutting them all out of the package because I actually want to use them. And now I got grandkids. And so I'm just like, here, take it. I just grabbed a Captain America bus the other day, drag bus. And my granddaughter's like, Papu, can I take it out of the package? And I was like, yeah, go ahead. What's the point, right? What's the point of having all these things in the package if you're just, I've thought about it a lot. Like, what's the reason that we collect stuff? Do we collect stuff because it's worth money? We collect stuff because we want to enjoy it. And can you truly enjoy something if it's in the box, right? So I think to some people, if you're in the business of collecting things, buying and selling and collecting, then it's your goal to have something in the box. But I think, if we're going to be the kind of people that we buy and to collect stuff to have cool souvenirs and toys, what's the purpose of a toy? It should be able to be played with. So I like taking them out of the package, let my grandkids play with them and stuff. So, I've always been that way since back in the day. And then I had a chance to track down, while I was there, I talked to the guys from Jada, and I always had this, wanted to talk to somebody over there because when my bus came out in 2001 or 2002, I think it was. In 2002, it came out, and I had it at the show. And then a year or two later, I happened to notice a VW bus, like the Jada Dubs cars. And so I talked to the guys at Jada. I said, hey, who designed that bus and where'd it come from? Because at the time when my bus came out, I was the only bus, the VW Classic, with 17-inch wheels on it. The only bus with Porsche four-wheel disc brakes. And, just that kind of whole look. And that first bus they came out with was black and red like my bus. My bus had the Audiobahn speakers and amps in it with the flames and all that stuff on there. And this bus that came out had speakers with flames and all that kind of stuff on there. So I hit up the guys with Jade, and I said, hey, who's here long enough to know? Can I talk to one of the guys, DJ, over there? And we'll be having him on the podcast because he actually has a 59 convertible. So we were rapping. He showed me his convertible and all the stuff. And it's super cool we kind of meet these guys that are in the hobby, that are in other aspects of automotive world, like the diecast world, and they can influence some stuff from there. And the one guy that was the head of Jada says, yeah, who knows? Probably, I don't know. Nobody's here that was there that long ago. So they did it. And then I kept talking to the guys. They go, if you really want to talk to the guy who was here in the beginning, you got to talk to Big Lou. So I head across the place to go talk to Big Lou, and he's with Cartooned, and they do a bunch of really rad morphed kind of muscle machine style kind of morphed vehicles that are a little more cartoony, and they look super rad, but they're die-cast. And so I talked to Big Lou, and I showed him a picture of my bus. He goes, yeah, who knows? Probably. He says, we go to a lot of shows and stuff, and we get a lot of inspiration. And so he proceeds to tell me about, he was one of the original guys at Jada that was doing a lot of the early toy design, stuff like that. And so he had given me some interesting tidbits. And every time we do this, I said, I need to get you on the podcast. So I'll be having him on the podcast hopefully soon. And we're going to talk about the effect of, we're going to talk about diecast. We're going to talk about specifically about Volkswagen diecast and some of the evolution, some of the ways they get the design and creativity and where they get their inspiration from. Because a lot of us see that, especially in those days when those Jada ones were coming out, they were starting to do the patina ones and the this and that. but the first thing they came out with is that black and red bus with the chrome wheels and chrome speakers and all that stuff, the Porsche shroud, all the same stuff my bus had. And so I just thought it was a little too familiar, but I tried to get some confirmation, either confirm or deny if it was any inspiration to the original models. But he said, it looks a lot like something that would have inspired us back in those days, but it's pretty cool. And we're going to get some insight coming up. So, but throughout that, I checked out the show. There was tons of stuff I didn't do. So what they do at these conventions like that, they have diecast guys in rooms across each other, and they actually rent out the whole hotel over there. And these guys go in their hotel rooms, lay out all kinds of stuff on their beds and dressers and all that stuff. And you just go from room to room, across from room to room, and look at cars people have for sale and all that stuff. And I didn't bother doing that because I was kind of there for the car show. I walked around downstairs and upstairs, had the whole first two stories of the hotel taken up. And the car show was pretty rad. There was $1,000 place for best of show over there. So there was a lot of super nice cars that showed up to it. I mean, there was, most importantly, there was a gang of C10s over there and some really, really expensively built nice C10s and quite a few lowriders. And there was the guy that got People's Choice had this, he had I don't know if it was a Chieftain wagon. I don't think it was an Impala wagon, but it was a wagon, and he had like bumpers were engraved, a ton of detail. So needless to say, I was there and I parked Zorba. And one of the things when I go to shows, I hate having the car all splayed open like it's a butterfly knife, right? The hood popped open, the doors open, trunk and all that. It's not the way the car looks right. So I keep the car pretty much closed up just so you can get the full effect of how the car's supposed to look. So as I'm checking with those guys, one guy's telling me like, hey, some people are complaining, because I saw some guys walk around judging the show. And, when I heard there was $1,000 prize for best of show, I was like, for sure, I'm going to check this out. And we got Zorba there, and we just, timing worked out perfect because we got there probably about 8:30, and there was 180 cars registered for the event, and there's all different types of cars. And the way that we had ended up in the show, like right when you walk out from the elevators and just walk into the deck that's exposed in the sunlight, my car was parked like right in the middle, the first thing you see when you come out. And needless to say, we did good, man. There was a couple exotics and a bunch of, you just name it, guys that go to the store and buy everything from O'Reilly's you can get for your car. There was just a ton of stuff on a lot of cars, and a lot of cars with a lot of detail in them, so the competition was pretty solid. Nonetheless, your boy took best of show, and I reached out to House of Cars, hit him up with a message, and see about getting my $1,000 for my best of show. But it's a nice C10 on my trophy, so that was nice. There was probably like 20 C10s there, and listen, I was thoroughly impressed. And when talking to the judges, right, I saw a lot of guys that were kind of in the show, judging the show. And one of the guys told me that the complaint was my hood wasn't open. So I went and opened up the hood, and I think they meant the engine compartment, but I opened up the front hood and showed off the air tank and all the detailing underneath there. At any rate, we, as I was talking to the guys and they're giving out the awards, and then, I was at a show 2 weeks prior to that I went to, just because I kept telling the guy I'd go to a show if he had one on Saturday. So he had one on Saturday, so I had to go. And, they had a best of show trophy over there, and then the guy that won best of show also won a top 25, which didn't make any sense to me, because normally if you're going to give a guy best of show, you don't bother giving him a top 25. And so at any rate, the car that took best of show over there, I figured it was between my car and there was a super nice Super Performance Cobra that was there, and this car was dialed. It was super, super clean. But the car that won was like missing a radio, and it was, it had a nice, had a shiny paint job, but it wasn't anything to scream about. But at any rate, sometimes, listen, when it's in the hands of the judges, you don't know what the criteria is. It is what it is. But this guy that was, I talked to him about the judging. I just said, hey, when he came out and he told me, he said, because obviously a lot of guys that were judging were like, well, no, we're not going to judge this. So he gets a 0 for that. So he can't win, even if it's a nice car here or whatever. And because I didn't have the engine compartment open. So at any rate, he had said that another phase of the show before they wrapped it up, they had a bunch of the designers come out and walk all the cars And he said the majority of all the designers picked my car for their favorites. So that's why he was like, that's why I wasn't even close. You were hands down, because like 30 designers picked your car, you know? And I think what that has to do with, right, is the uniqueness of the car, because not a lot of people have seen a Type 34 Carmen Ghia. I mean, us guys in the Volkswagen world, we see that stuff a lot. And so it's not too uncommon, but to see one done really nice, it's a bit of a standout. It's like seeing a nice Hebmuller or a nice split window or something that's a little more on the rare side. But I think that's one of the advantages that Zorba has, is just being a Type 34 Ghia. And then the electric blue paint, like, you know, that Zorba blue metallic, you know, it's that sea blue metallic. And I think that also, it's just that, the graphics, I mean, there's a lot going on there. So, but I think one of the advantages is the fact that it's a Type 34 Carmen Ghia. It's really unique in a lineup of any kind of cars anywhere. So, but I was pretty stoked about that. Definitely stoked about getting my wall hangers from MassCar, and I'll put a link down in the description below if you guys want to go check them out, and make sure you let them know that Bill T sent you. And they should be doing a, because I like their product a lot. So I said, hey, if you guys want, I'm down to be an affiliate with you guys. And so they're we'll see where that goes. But I really, really like the product that you just kind of put on the wall and hang all your die cast and all that stuff. So it was super cool, and it made me happy, because now I could take a bunch of my stuff out of the packages and hang it on the wall. So all in all, the Diecast SuperCon was pretty cool, and I'll probably go back to the show again next year, just because I like going there and seeing. I mean, they had the Dukes of Hazzards there. They had all kind of people there. And so next year I might spend a little more time just kind of going through the rooms and checking out the different diecasts and stuff that people have, because now they got a display to put stuff up, man. It's a cool thing to check out. So that's my experience at the Diecast SuperCon. So I would definitely suggest you guys check it out if you have an opportunity. And then I understand that this summer at some point in June, Jada's going to do a reunion. So if the Bull Run bus were any bit closer, man, I'd freaking jam that thing over there and get it done. But I did just see one of the things George and I are going to be doing with the Bull Run bus, we're going to be converting it to IRS. And that IRS conversion kit is coming from Type E Motorsports. So if you guys are looking to do any of your lowering, suspension adjustments for bugs and buses, affordable disc brake kits, go check out my buddy Brian over there at Type E Motorsports. Hit him up. He makes some of the coolest brake kits that are really, really affordable. So if you guys are listening right now and you got a bus and you're looking for an inexpensive front conversion, he sells you the parts you need to bolt on Chevy parts for the front brakes. And why Chevy? Why? Because they're always available. They're always going to be in stock. So it's pretty ingenious way he set it up, because he's got a background in rock crawling and stuff like that. So go check him out at Type E Motorsports on Instagram. So go check him out at typeemotorsports.com. Well, now's about the time to go ahead and listen to episode 29 Remastered. So this is my interview with Bob Lacoste. This was, we're going back. It's episode 29. We're up to 305 now. So, I met Bob when I joined DBK, and I joined DBK through my buddies, Miguel and Tony up in the Bay Area, and they were members of DBK, NorCal, and we had been friends for a long time. And I had just busted out the Ghia just recently, and they were like, bro, you should park with us. You should hang with us at DBK. You know what I mean? So I met Pip. We all got along, met Pip, Bob, and all the guys over there. And so they kind of hooked it up, and I was in the club. And then it's super informal. It's about the cars. It's about having some of the nicest cars. And so for me, it was more being part of a club that, like, when you heard that that's a quote unquote DBK car, like, you know how clean the car is. So, but yeah, that's where I met Bob, and Bob was always just a great guy, just an unbelievable wealth of knowledge. Guy was super, super knowledgeable about so much stuff. And you'll really get to hear all about it in this remastered podcast. So, I'm excited to be able to bring it to you guys, man. Miss my guy, Bob, man, rest in peace. And, for those of you that didn't get to know him, at least you get to hear a little bit of his story. And so let's get into it, guys. Bob Lacoste, rest in peace, brother. All right, everybody, welcome to another episode of Let's Talk Dubs. I'm your host, Bill T. On today's podcast, I've got one of the three guys down there at the compound that's helping put together all the stuff that Pip designs and
and the rest of the guys, Mike and Bob, Bill down there. So on today's podcast, we got Bob Lacoste. You might remember from May 2005 Hot VWs. He had a black square back with a ton of NOS parts on it. So today on the podcast, Bob, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Good to see you, Bill.
Hey, so I've seen you quite a bit, over the past few years. I've been coming down for the barbecues and all that stuff, me being DBK Vegas out here on the island. Then I come out there, kind of hang out with you guys once a weekend, every year. And usually when I get down there, you're super slammed, busy, knocking out all the final detail and a bunch of stuff, and you're just going like a madman. And so to be able to sit and chat with you, don't get that opportunity very often. But we had a few minutes to chat at Prado, and you started to give me some of your history, and I thought, I need Bob on the podcast. So I got you on the podcast now, and we got a lot of history to go through and a lot of your background that I don't think a lot of the people out there in the VW scene know where you've been and what you've been doing for the past so many years. So we're going to get to that in a minute. The first thing that we always do is I get into how you got into VWs. So what's your VW story, and how did you get into Volkswagens?
As a young child, growing up in the Valley, I grew up in the lowrider team. It was Chevys and Impalas. And that was cool. That's all I knew back then. But around the corner, as a kid, I was that annoying kid that stood right in front of a garage door, watching, a father and son doing a Volkswagen build. It was a charcoal gray 64 Bug, and any of us car guys, I was 7 years old. I can smell that paint like it was yesterday.
Yeah,
and,
for sure.
And on the side, they were building a fiberglass kit car, which will tie into our story a little bit later.
Yeah.
But that was literally, I used to stand right in front of the garage and just watch them work on their car. And it was either, like, kid, beat it or grab a broom, do something. And, so my very first experience on anything was they threw some wheels at me and gave me a razor blade and scrape off the paint off the back of these wheels so we could put them on. From that, there was my Uncle Randy had a 1966 Triumph TR4, the very first engine I ever took apart. Still, I was 7 years old.
Yeah.
But I got to take the engine apart. Yeah, cool.
For sure, yeah. Pulling a motor apart 7 years old is a pretty tall order.
Volkswagens were kind of like always there, but then I, growing up and getting into, teenage years, it was hot rods. I bought every issue of Street Rod and Street Rodder magazine. My bedroom walls, the wallpaper was, insert, all pages, peel down the magazines, car.
Right.
Well, one summer I was in Van Nuys and saw this movie set. It looked like they were filming a movie, which lo and behold, it was Hollywood Danza. Smitty speech.
What was the movie?
Hollywood Nights.
Hollywood
Nights with Tony Danza.
Oh, with Tony.
Iconic movie. And there was in the car hops was a brown chop top oval window bug that had just been featured in a hot rod magazine in a Cowlook special. It had that brown bug. It had a black bug with silver and green flames. And it had a 68 bug. I don't know, a late bug, Riviera's, with a bunch of graphic paint job on it.
And what year?
We're talking 1979.
Oh, wow.
Probably about 78, 79. No later than 80. I mean, whenever Hollywood Nights movie came out, those who know. But as they say, when I bought that issue of the Hot Rod magazine that had the Volkswagens in it, the last Hot Rod magazine I bought, and the very first Hot VW magazine I bought, and the rest is history.
Yeah. So now what was your first Volkswagen?
Early 63 notchback high side marker.
And where'd you find that car?
My brother actually found it.
Really? You found it in California, Simi Valley?
Thousand Oaks.
Thousand Oaks, huh?
The car came out of Thousand Oaks. It was sitting on the side of a house. My brother does landscaping. And, he called me up one morning. I was in high school. I was still a junior in high school. And he says, hey, what's what's a car that looks like Grandpa's car? It's not a station wagon, and the front looks just like the back. And I was like, sounds like a notchback to me. Yeah. Click, he hung up the phone. I went to school, Yeah. He called me that night and just picking my brain about it. And I just wondered, what does he got going on, And lo and behold, that was my first car. He'd called me up and said, come on out with me. Check out my new lawnmowers, but inside the garage was this 1963 notchback. And on my Instagram page, I have a Throwback Thursday of the very first car, and that's the one.
So your first car was a 63 notchback. What year is this?
1982.
And now, do you build this car, or do you just kind of assemble it, drive it? What do you do with the 63 notch?
You want to talk about a crash course and things not to do with VW. It was a 63 notchback. It was completely original. The motor, for whatever reason, was actually sitting inside the car, taken down to a short block. I got the car. It had 4 locked up brake drums. I had auto shop in high school. So on weekends, I would go out to Thousand Oaks to my brother's house and remove things from the car and work on them at auto shop in high school.
Oh, really?
Until we got it up and running. And I pieced the motor back together, not knowing anything.
Yeah.
It had the original 6-volt battery in it that was bone dry. And when we got the motor up and running, we simply filled it up with bottled water.
Nice.
Strapped the car to the back of my brother's truck and drove it in third gear through his neighborhood one night.
To start it?
Until dash lights came on, and it fired off on its own.
Oh, and you drug it by the front bumper?
Yeah. Rope.
Yes,
Rope.
we took a rope, put it around. Oh, that's what happened to all those bumpers.
It didn't have brakes at that point. It had an e-brake, but no brakes.
E-brakes, good enough. Good enough. So it's your first car. Like all of us with our first cars, we kind of trash the crap out of the first car because we're just figuring stuff out, and what it doesn't matter. Whatever we think is cool, we think it's cool. So
it was $150. The car cost $150.
the best $150 you ever spent, right, for a car. So
best first car anybody could ever ask for.
Yeah, absolutely. And so what ended up happening with that notchback?
I drove it for about a year and a half. I traded it for a 67 sunroof lug. Had big motor in it, so I was into power. I did that until I graduated high school. And then, mom and pops, how are you working on these cars? You need to get a new car. You got to get a job. And, I was working at the grocery store. Paying out of trouble.
You're working at the grocery store. You're into VWs. You're kind of doing that stuff on the side. Now, how do you transition into getting, and then how much time is it from high school to when you get into working on VWs for a living?
I've always done VWs on the side. Always had a VW. I've had probably in my own time, probably about 80.
Well, about 80 Volkswagens, huh?
Mostly squarebacks.
Mostly. You're like a freak for squarebacks, huh?
I'm a Type 3 guy.
Yeah, no, that's legit, man. And the crazy thing is the compound hasn't pushed out a bunch of Type 3s, right? You've only done, what, 2?
There's one that's been on deck for quite a while, and I would love to get it in the work. Make it happen. Yeah.
You did English Pips Type 3, right? You guys did that over there?
I had no involvement in that car.
Oh, you had no involvement in that car?
No involvement in the Hancock's car. No.
So we know you're a Type 3 guy and you're doing this. So you're working on VWs on the side. Now, when you and I got to talking, you told me you had some history working at BFY. Is that your first job working full-time doing VW stuff? Was working at BFY?
As far as working for somebody, yes. I had me and a friend of mine, my buddy Ty 3 Double, longtime friend. We had a shop out in Riverside back when we were doing, with a Japanese market, so we were flipping, we were turning burning.
You guys were buying squarebacks and selling them to Japan, huh?
4 to 6 a month.
I wonder if you guys, would you guys go to Pomona Swap Meet to buy them?
At both. Sell them at Swap Meet. The first car we ever built, as far as taking to a Swap Meet for sale, was a 67 Savannah Beige on Rivieras. And I burned midnight oil on it, got it ready by about 4 o'clock in the morning. We loaded it, headed out to Pomona, and Lenny was there with the car house out of Japan back in the day. And it didn't even get off the trailer. They didn't bicker on the price. $9,500 for a squareback back in the 90s. You know, so we thought we'd hit the big boom.
My brother George actually sold his squareback to the Japanese back in the 90s. George had a black squareback that he took first place. I want to say it was probably the 93 or 94 Jamboree. It was a black squareback with a white roof, red interior, and had a full-length wood slat roof rack and sitting on fully polished 2 liters. And he sold that car. I wonder if that car went through your hands to get to Japan. I know he sold it and it ended up in Japan, but I think he sold it for like $6,500 and thought he just killed it. You know what I mean?
Well, if you want to know, when I sold my black 64, I got $34,000 for it.
Yeah, it's a little bit different. That's a big stretch, you know. So now tell me about working at BFY. So how do you end up getting a job at BFY, and what's the scene like back then when you're working at BFY?
I had actually, I'd closed down, you know, me and my partner, you know, we separated ways and I went off on my own. I ended up working for another guy. I'll leave his name out of it for now. You probably know who he is. And I worked with him for a while. And while I was working on his cars, it was always going to BFY buying the parts. And back at the time, you know, when Darren owned the place, it was, you know, hey, you're always here. Why don't you stand on the other side of the counter and I'll pay you? And that's kind of how it started. So, and I said, well, I'll give you 2 days a week. I said, you know, I'll work for you, but not full time. And so, and I started there and it was, you know, just counter sales. But there was restoration projects sitting in limbo in the back. I'm like, you know, well, what's up with this black 65 convertible back there? You know, I got to get put together. I'm like, well, that's where I should be. You know, somebody else stand for the phone. You know, let me put it together.
Yeah, putting the cars together that's where most of the stuff hits stall points at most shops, is getting the assembly of those cars put back together, because the assembly takes a lot of time, especially with a painted vehicle, because you got to be careful, you got to know what you're doing, and you got to prep the parts properly so that things go back together correctly. You know what I mean? Which is probably a testament to how good you guys are doing stuff, because you guys kick out cars out of the compound on a pretty consistent basis, but you guys are nose to the grindstone over there just kicking stuff out. I mean, on the reg, like no stops, man. You guys just keep going and keep going. I don't know if there's any shop that's produced more high-level cars than your guys' shop over the past, 7-8 years. I mean, you guys have just been, how long have you been over there with Pip now?
4 years. Just over 4 years now.
And I mean, you guys, they've been pushing out cars for a while. You know what I mean?
Yeah, well established before I ever came along.
And part of that process is the planning part, you know what I mean? Planning the parts, getting the parts situated, doing all that stuff so that when the car gets back from paint, all the parts pieces are laid out, everything's on deck, and then it really starts going together relatively quick until you start hitting the hard stuff, the windows, the convertible tops. I mean, those probably, in your opinion, the convertible is probably the most difficult cars to put together.
It's without question, and especially an early convertible. I mean, like, for me, a 65 and later convertible, they're two different beasts. They're much easier to work with, way more user-friendly. Parts are cheaper, more interchangeable, especially, with the TAM 55 sitting right here. That one was, to get these doors dialed in was a small chore, but they're dialed in.
No, I'll believe it. So when you're over there at BFY, you're starting to assemble cars. How many cars do you assemble over there while you're at BFY?
Even at BFY?
Yeah.
Oh, gosh. Probably 20.
So you finished off 20 cars that kind of were hitting a stall project because they didn't have a guy that was just knocking them out and putting them together.
Fair amount of cars that I did at BFY that were featured in magazines, with my name, and sometimes, you don't get the credit for what you do.
What's the most popular car that you put together over there?
Mine.
Oh, the Squareback?
Mine. No, I'd have to say in my, and by pure, coincidence, the Horizon Blue 57 convertible that I did, which was also used for the last catalog that was made. So they used the car as I was building it for snapshots, for pictures, to caption with part numbers and, give you a visual,
Sure.
With what you're buying. That's how that car was put together. It was a second owner car. it also went to the Volkswagen dealership in Florida where my squareback went. That's kind of, that's on a personal note, that's like a good accomplishment. I have a 59 Rometch convertible that is in the Wolfsburg Museum. It's parked next to a red and white coupe.
Oh wow, that's a car. That's a car you put together at BFY.
At BFY through Rick D. Carlson.
Yeah, that's nuts, man.
That one, that one goes down as probably that would be my greatest accomplishment. That if it's actually still in, in the Wolfsburg Museum, I need to top that.
Well, so the Rometch that you built, was it what type of Rometch was it? Was it a
Lawrence, a 59?
So it was a Lawrence. So the Lawrence, the one that looks more, it's more American style. It looks kind of like a baby 57 Chevy type of deal. Yeah. They have, the bodies on those are aluminum, right?
Aluminum body on a wooden shell on a VW pair.
And they're pretty easy to dent. Like if you're working on the car, it's pretty easy to dent that car.
You could look at it the wrong way and put a dent in it.
Yeah. So, I mean, we're working on one of those.
Very documented.
Yeah. I mean, and I'm sure you guys, there's got to be a special primer that goes on those bodies because to get that paint to stick to aluminum, you've got to put like a special kind of etching primer on there or what?
Epoxy primer, but I don't get into the body end of it.
Sure. Well, yeah, but you just got to dance around it after it's all done. Your primary focus has always been assembly and finishing off the cars, the detail stuff.
All electrical. I do all of the electrical. If you like it, I did it. If you don't like it, I did it. Yeah.
I'm assuming the early cars are easier to wire than the later cars by far, right?
Yeah, like when we did the most difficult car I'd wired up as far as a Volkswagen would be the Drew Carey, the Price is Right 68.
What kind of stuff did that car have that made it different?
For simple fact, it's a padded dash. It's 68. All the dash got recovered in black leather with a double stitch cross top and seam. Yeah. But all faking switches all got mounted underneath the dash, which means rewiring. Shaved off the turn signals off the fenders, put H4 headlights in it, but I blew the headlights apart, and I installed my own LED for parking light, 3 clear amber LEDs on the side of the headlight, so you get all light functions out of the headlight bulb. So there's nothing on the fenders, there's nothing on the bumper, it's just headlight. The rear tail lights, all LED, but custom built by Mike the Hammer here, but all done up with LED lighting.
Now you're working at BFY. Now you were at BFY through both phases of BFY now?
2001 to till it basically diminished.
Yeah, and so what year did BFY close?
07.
So it closed in 07, and then originally the owner of BFY was Rich Kimball?
Mm-hmm.
And then Rich Kimball sold it to the guy that you were working for over there?
It went through a couple of hands.
Oh, it did? It changed hands a few times.
Yeah. BFY, I guess, and Rich Kimball could tell the story better than anybody else, as of, Jeff Walters, because they're all they're the ones that founded it. Scott Hendrickson, Jeff Walters, Rich Kimball, and, forgive me, I think there was somebody else. I don't want to give the wrong name, but I think there was somebody else. But in the Hobby W magazine back in the early 80s, when they did the treasure hunting in Venezuela,
right,
and bought all the dealerships and brought back all these NOS parts, that's how Bugs for You was created.
Yeah, that's nuts. I mean, they used to go down there to Venezuela and Brazil and places like that and just get all these huge parts caches of like crazy NOS stuff that wasn't around anymore. So those are some of the coolest issues to look through, just to look at all the stuff that they had found. But the funny part is, in hindsight, when that was coming out in the magazines, I really was just more into kind of cow look custom bugs. So I really didn't care about all the rare like W deck lid convertibles, stuff like that. I was like, big deal, because my scene was like, cut it off if you don't need it, shave the door handle and make it, red, flashy and cool. So now that I've been in the scene a lot longer and I've pursued other vehicles that they're a little more rare than like a 62 bug, you really get an appreciation for these old NOS parts that are out there. And there was tons of stuff they were finding back in the early 90s.
Well, there were no, strictly 4 original German NOS, all stock vintage, nothing, custom cowlet going on out there. I mean, now I can honestly say that, because Mark Bruto was, between him and Scott Hendrickson, those were the guys that were, they were the gearheads in the back doing, restoring the old cars back then. And, Scott was extremely well known for gears.
So you're at BFY, you're putting cars together, and then when do you start build? So when do you find your squareback that you built that you were on this massive parts hunt for all these NOS parts? Like where do you find your squareback?
The squareback came from Small Car Connection and then Asperia. I got it from Big Chris. Rest in peace, brother.
Yeah, so Big Chris is a good dude, man. Hey, he's a good friend of mine, and we talked a little bit before the podcast, and I want to touch on this. And Chris it's funny, Chris, if Chris liked you, that meant he trusted you. You know what I mean? And so if Chris trusted you, he's a good guy to have to be able to have him trust you. And like you said, you were able to get access. I mean, Chris was one of those guys back in the days in Venezuela and all that stuff, getting a lot of those OEM parts and a lot of NOS stuff. Chris went all around the world getting a bunch of that stuff. And even until, a year or two before he passed away, Chris pulled his last haul out of Casper, Wyoming at a dealership up there. And, he was telling me, he says, man, I've been doing this, 30 years pulling stuff out of dealerships. He said, I thought it was dead. He says, I can't believe the stuff I got out of that last haul. And it was like, NOS oval stuff, NOS barn door stuff, NOS, all kinds of stuff that's just been up there in Casper, Wyoming forever. And he was even surprised that it was still around even in this day and age. So you find the squareback at Small Car at Hesperia, and you're living where at this time? Are you living down the hill in Southern California?
I'm born and raised Southern California.
And so how do you find this car up at Small Car? Are you going up there just because he's got a ton of cool parts, or what?
Well, at the time I lived in Riverside, hour and a half, worst case. If you know exactly where it's at, they're out in the middle of nowhere.
So you would go to Small Car consistently just looking for stuff, or what were you doing out there?
Parts. It started out with, going in with parts, and you definitely hit the nail on the head with trust when it comes with Chris, because he wasn't the person to let anybody rummage through his collection.
Oh yeah, and I'll put some pictures. Yeah, I'll put some pictures up of Chris's yard. I went to Chris's yard. The first time I went to Chris's yard was 2004 or 5. And I was just blown away at how much stuff he had in that yard. I mean, he had Type 34 Gias. He had all kinds of stuff in that yard, man. And everything. It was just nuts. And it was like he knew where everything was, and it was like it's just impossible to keep track of the place. But he knew. The guy knew where everything was. And I used to just sit. My favorite thing to do with Chris was just get him talking about the deals he would get, because I would just love to hear the deals. Because this guy was just like, if you want to talk about a guy who really, he'd been working so hard in the scene that it would seem like he would just fall into deals everywhere. But people knew, like, if you had stuff and you needed to move it, Chris was your guy to get it moved for him. I mean, he'd sell stuff to guys in South Africa. He'd sell stuff to guys all over the world. And it's crazy because he'd look at something that you and I would see as worthless and go, nope, that part right there in Peru, they buy the crap out of those. You know what I mean? Like the oddest things. But, Chris was kind of that guy where he just knew everything that was sellable on a Volkswagen.
We got to a point where he would, actually call us and give us first shot if he had a nice car coming in, give us first shot. And, and normally, we took it,
Yeah. Cause Chris had a good eye for getting stuff. So you're now, we're talking about your history. So you're working at BFY for a while, and as you're working at BFY, they come to their ultimate demise. In what year is this?
That's a whole episode. Oh,
yeah. I mean, like before it shuts down. So you're working there pretty consistently, 40 hours a week. And then you see
I worked there for 8 years. And when I was looking to find the way out, I had a job offer, and it was actually right when I was finishing off my squareback for the 05 Classic that I actually had a job offer from American Hot Rod, the Hot Rod.
Really? Over at the Hot Rod shop?
Yeah. And I was like, well, I don't know, I mean, I'd love to work on hot rods. I'm a car guy, so I'm not worried about the camera. But shortly after that, it didn't pan out, It wasn't a wasn't a well sewn machine. You know what I mean? I know a couple of the guys.
Is that how? Because usually when you get a job at a place like that, like somebody knows that you're good at swinging a hammer somewhere, and they'll call you up and say, "Hey, man, come over here to this shop. We'll pay you a few bucks more, and we just need help."
Well, at that time, it was Dan, one of the guys that was on the show when they were on TV. And he's a Super Beetle guy. He's into late Super Beetle convertibles. And he, a Saturday BFY shopper. And I had commented to him on one Saturday. I'd happened to be there. And it was after one of their shows. And I said, that guy on the show, what a dummy, get your car built, on TV and pay to have it done for you. And you're still going to screw it up. And like, man, I would love to have an opportunity like that. Well, a week later, the opportunity was presented to me because he came back. He said, "Hey, I actually talked to Boyd and he wants you to come down, talk to him." Yeah, I was like, okay, and I did all that, did the interviews. I took my car, I even took the square back there on one of their Saturday open houses when they did the unveiling of the Max Wedge Hemi. Yeah, I was there through that. That's when I was trying to get on board with them, but it like I said, it didn't happen, didn't pan out, and
so where did you end up after that?
Well, then, that's after, and I gave Darren a 30-day notice to BFY, not even 2 weeks. I gave him 30 days, get some, if you want to get somebody in so I can, get somebody lined up so you can, keep the, the restoration and the service.
You were just ready to get out of there.
Well, I was ready to move forward.
What made you want to leave?
The opportunity.
At Boyd's place?
To work on street rods. It wasn't about TV. It was about to, work on high-end cars. I wanted to work on better cars than what I was working on. I felt that I would step up for the challenge.
So where did you end up after you left BFY?
I ended up, because that fell through, and then I started up my own shop.
What was the name of the shop?
I did Lacoste Automotive for
what were you doing there? Restorations?
Oh, Volkswagen, same thing.
And how did you like running your own business?
That's why I don't do it anymore.
That's a lot more work than sometimes when you're there with your head under the hood of the car, you're thinking like, man, this is easy. Anybody could do this, but then you realize it's easier sometimes to be under the hood of the car than to run the business.
Well, I'm more, I can hold wire crimpers and strippers, and work with them better than I can on a telephone and customers. So, to say straight up, business guy, nah, put the wrenches back in my hand, and that's where I shine.
So you tried Lacoste Automotive for a little bit. That doesn't pan out. What do you do after that?
That's how I ended up here.
So then you end up, how do you cross paths with Pip?
I've known Pip, well, actually, I really physically had never met him on a, just a regular good old-fashioned guy-to-guy conversation until I started working here. I would see him at the shows. He knew who I was. I knew who he was, And back when I was doing my own thing, it was, I would have felt that, and it might be a bold statement, but, Pip was my competition. I've got to build a car like he's building, but.
And so what cars when you were on your own, did you build any cars that we know of that would have been in magazines and stuff?
Like I said, years and months of magazines, I can't recall. But
sure. Not exactly, but I mean.
The 62 Bug that was, air ride and leather, inside out, chrome.
Oh, you built custom stuff too. You didn't just stick to just doing.
I'm all across the board. I can go both ways.
And so now at this time, when you start your own business, do you sell the squareback before then, or do you still have the squareback at the time you start your own?
I sold the squareback to start my own business.
That's what I was looking for, because I'm thinking, how does he get?
That's what fun to. Yeah, that's what made it.
Yeah, so you sell the squareback to start a business, and then you find out, you think, well, I got a good chunk of change. That should be able to get me going for a little bit, and then. When you're working your own business, are you working for yourself, or you got people? I mean, is it just you working, or do you got employees?
At that time, one-man show. Answer the phone, work on the cars. I did everything. It was only me.
And that was in Riverside?
That was in Orange.
And so you kind of get to a point where you want to start. You're ready to just get back to turn the wrenches and not be the only the alpha and the omega at the organization.
Yeah. let somebody work with, with clientele and deal with the money end of it. Just let me prime the wrench.
Now you end up over at the compound over there with Pip and those guys. What's the first project you work on?
Ironically, Milo's Atlantic Green 53, which is, he's the guy that owns
The convertible.
this Spindit.
Yeah. That's that the Atlantic Green convertible. The Atlantic Green 53 is a super nice car. And then now you guys are doing this the convertible there. So the first thing you work on is that. The next car, and interestingly enough, as much as Pip's cars, they all kind of have a theme that run through them. They're all uniquely different in their own respect. I think one of the big things that a lot of people like with the stuff they see come out of the compound, at least I can speak for myself, some of the stuff that I really like seeing is like the real tight seat upholstery. Like the seats don't look overstuffed, bulky, and big. They're nice. They're tight. They look vintage without being completely out of whack. You know what I mean? Like I had some seats done here in town for my 55 and they look like the Pillsbury Doughman. I mean, they're so overstuffed and so fluffy. And it's like, that the German square weave, the minor accents to the car instead of going over the top. Cause you see people think like, hey, if I got one accessory, I should have 100 and that will be even cooler. But it's like you can completely overdo it with accessories and add-ons and doodads and all that stuff. And it seems like all the stuff that comes out of the compound is like less is more, right? That's the statement.
We go completely opposite of that. We go completely opposite. And I think that if you look at our cars, because the idea is to simplify them, build it like the factory could have built it, step it up a couple notches. So you'll spend more time looking for the small stuff that we do on these cars because it's hidden, and you got to walk around them 3-4 times and keep, and you'll see something else. You'll see something else. This will grab you. Spotlights up in the front of a car does nothing for us. If it comes, I'll take them off the car.
What was the first time that Pip's telling you you're going to do something like some level of detail where you're like, man, are you serious? Like no one's even going to see that. You know what I mean? Like, what's the first thing that you see when you're first starting there that you're thinking like, man, this guy's trying to get us to another level?
We think the same. I'm just as guilty. Absolutely.
Obsessed over detail?
Absolutely. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Quote unquote, I'll say I picked the fly shit out of the fly's ass.
Yeah. So you get super detailed on it.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. Doesn't matter whether you see it or not. But if somebody wants to challenge it, I'll gladly, I'll remove a panel and show you. No leaf goes unturned.
I remember seeing some of the radios you guys were doing. You guys were getting like serious detail inside the tubing and all that stuff inside the radios.
Oh, I've got a couple steering wheels coming up here that.
Yeah, they're mega detailed.
This is a banjo, a Petri wheel. You can see that. Okay, so this is the back side of the hub, and all these brass rings are all contacts because this one is going to have dual horn rings.
Oh, wow.
One is for the actual horn, and the other one is for turn signal switch. So your horn ring will do your turn signals. And then on the front cover with, all your contacts. On the horn button area, we'll also have your high beam indicator and your generator and your oil pressure light.
Yeah, that's crazy. And those were usually those were usually in Porsches where you'd find those, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I know they make some. I mean, some of the Petri horn rings are just out of control. Some of those steering wheels. I mean, but it's crazy how you look at the technology of those vintage cars, and there were so many things that, like with the Blaupunk picnic radios, like a pull-out radio, they'd have something like that was built back in the 50s. You could pull a radio right out of a car and then take it on a picnic, kick it on, it had battery backup in it, and you just listen to the radio sitting at a picnic. So it was like the first pull-out radios.
And in 6-volt.
So yeah, there's a lot of crazy stuff in it, but as many cars have come out of the compound just over the last few years, it never ceases to amaze me the little tiny different tricks that Pip does just to kind of make those cars, the ideas he comes up with that you guys put together that are just wild, that you see that you look at it, anybody could have thought of it, but nobody else did. You know what I mean? And he comes up with these ideas to do some stuff, and they just really come off looking really, really good, So it's got to be Is that exciting for you working there, doing that? Like knowing that you got a project coming in, what you guys are going to like, you have no idea what it smells like when it leaves the door.
Oh, well, I love, I throw my 2 cents into everything.
What's one of the,
Yeah, I like to get my part into it too.
what's your favorite thing to do?
Yeah, not to take away from anybody else, because like I said, we all have our little, gig that we do here, and all our quirks. We all suffer ADD, so imagine that times 3.
And so what are some of your favorite mods that you guys have done over there that you guys have kind of perfected?
It's constantly trying to improve. For me personally, it's trying to constantly improve wiring. I mean, I've still got thoughts and ideas. There's more things that I can do. We're changing up the way we're doing the alternators with wiring again, which is going to make it brutally impossible to detect any wires. But it's trying to take that up to the front of the car and start, I need to step it up in the front, because it's kind of the same thing. I mean, I can tidy up the wires in the trunk, but I'm at the point where I don't want to see them. So I've got some thoughts. I've got some ideas of what I want to do for the next custom build. But, if it pans out, you will really wonder how the hell is this thing run.
Well, that's awesome. I mean, putting that time and effort into some of those details are really what make it fun when a new car comes out. Cause it's like, okay, they're all 53 ovals. Great. But what makes this one stand apart from the other one, or what makes this one different, or it's a split window, but it's like those small nuances of little detail things make the biggest difference. And maybe sometimes the best thing is when people don't even catch that you did something to a car, that it looks so normal, even though you modded something, I mean, in respect to the stuff that you guys do there, what is the most time consuming thing that you do that almost goes unnoticed?
Polishing.
Yeah.
I hand polish every nut and bolt, one by one.
Really?
One by one.
Every one, huh?
One by one, individually.
Yeah, that's got to take some time.
When you're doing, when you're doing 750 pieces of hardware, adds up real fast.
For some of our people listening out there, like a guy who's decided to take on his project himself, what would you give a guy, if you got to give a guy some tips as to how to put their car back together? Like, what would be some of the tips you'd give a guy working in his garage to make his project pull apart and go back together in an efficient manner? I mean, do you guys have a system that you work with over there? Is there some process you go through to where you start on this end and work to that way, or what can you speak to in respect to that, like the processes that make it more productive every day getting the car done?
If we're talking like a ground up build,
yeah,
plain and simple. First 2 things I do, it's just simple, standard procedure. I chase every thread in the body and the chassis and every part that's painted, powder coated, plated before I will install anything.
So you chase all the threads, tap everything.
Everything. And if you want to know what the thread sizes are, I can tell you. And then second on the list is wiring. I wire up the bodies well before we start doing any assembly on them. I do all the wiring.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So you pull all the wiring through this way, at least if you're going to be running things underneath the dashboard and you've got wiring that's got to go through, you're taking that into consideration when you're assembling those parts and pieces, not so you run that harness and you're like, oh crap, how's this thing going to come through here?
Well, on top of, when we've got a gloss black pan, I'm not going to crawl inside the pan and, be working on the dash. I do it while the buckets go on the rack. So I can just, I'm still on the ground. There's no fenders, there's no hood, nothing. Everything's exposed. And I do all my wiring, and then we start hanging fenders. And, then I go in, do the dash, and then I start doing all the, the switches and the gauge restorations. I do all that here too. I mean, all that's done.
So do you guys restore the gauges there in-house?
I do. I do all of that.
And so, like, obviously most of these Speedos and stuff that you get, they don't work when you get them.
Semaphores, none of it. None of it.
All
the above. All the above.
Wow. So you really to rebuild a Speedo, are you available to get the gears and all that stuff? Do you get that deep into it where you pull apart the gearing on it and use the broken gears?
I change gears. The only thing I cannot do is magnetize the speedometer to calibrate it. It's the only thing I'm not equipped to do.
So to speak to that, the speedometer, you can't change the gear ratio in it to make it
No,
match the tire
no.
size you're putting on?
Well, they're gear driven, but your needle is run off of a magnet, so it runs off resistance. So
Oh, really?
yeah, so if you're dealing with a speedometer and you know, if somebody's going to calibrate your speedometer, they're not changing anything. What they're going to do is they're going to send a signal through the cable and add or take away the
Magnetic force.
magnetic force that's going to allow the needle to move fast or slow. I mean, that's how you calibrate one. But,
Oh, really?
yeah. So you're not changing gear. There's nothing to change.
Oh, that's wild. So it's just a straight mechanical thing that just plugs right in. There's very few gearing.
Yeah, it's magnetic driven. I think I have a piece over on the side. I can even explain it, And a lot of these things, these are the kind of things a lot of people ask me about, like, post a video of this, And, and I like to do it, but I don't also like to give everything away.
Well, yeah, you can't give all your secrets away. Now, when you get the Speedos, are the Speedo faces, are they pretty easily restored, or like do you have to get them repainted, or I mean, are they're pretty well done at the factory and you can clean them pretty good, or what's the deal?
I've gone, so many different ways with that, decals, stickers, or, how many speedometers does it take to put one back together? Rob Peter to pay Paul. Not everything's available new, not yet. You got to work with what you got, or you get creative. But I definitely get creative. Like on the tan convertible, that one's all color matched. So all the bezel, inside, it's all color matched to the body. New needle on it. It's reset to 0. It has been calibrated, so it's good to go.
Oh, wow. And so, in respect to some of the other stuff you guys are doing, I mean, I know that you guys use Old Speed for most of your suspension stuff, your suspension parts, your brakes, and all that kind of stuff.
Always.
Yeah, you guys. I mean, Russell's. It's funny. I want to get Russell on the podcast so we can just talk about what he does, because I think he's one of those guys that's.
You got to pick his brain too.
Yeah, he's not. He flies under the radar. He posts some stuff here and there, but he does. I mean, that when it comes to knowing about stuff, brake setups and carb setups and all that kind of stuff, Russell's got a ton of knowledge, man. And one of these days I'm going to corner him and get him on the podcast. But you guys doing all the cars you do there, you guys do with the Willwood brakes and the lengthened or shortened arms or whatever he's doing, and then the custom beams that he builds.
Yeah, and we take his product and then and we still put our touch on,
blow it apart and detail it even more.
But we only use Russell's brake kits. We don't use anybody else's.
So now, so I want to talk for a minute about your square back. So your square back that you built that was in Hot VWs. Sometimes people look at it and it may go unnoticed unless you sit and read the article, because it, for all intents and purposes, was a black square back. There was red interior on that.
No, that was all original. All stock style original interior.
What color was interior?
Off-white with gray mesh.
Off-white with gray mesh interior. On that car, how complete was that car when you bought it?
I got it from Small Car Connection.
I mean, it was just a shell or what?
It was a junkyard. I bought it because, so this goes back into my notchback, my first car. My first notchback was a 63, and it was original off-white, Pearl 87.
Yeah.
L87 Pearl White. And it was painted orange on the outside. When I walked out into the back of Small Car, here's this 64 squareback that was original L87, painted orange, and me being a Type 3 guy, 5 lug. I got 5 lug and push button dash. I like the early stuff. And there's that car sitting there. It's in orange. The hood's hanging up, rear hatch is hanging up, and it was a 5 lug car. And I was like, I gotta have it. What's the story on that? It's like, it's for sale. $900. I was like, and I was gonna give the $900, but after we were done doing our rendezvous and being out in the back and scavenging for parts and what have you, we go back into Trip's office. Then he pulls out the creme de la creme, which I ended up being second owner of the car. It was an original owner car that the guy bought straight from the factory in Germany in 1964 and drove it around for 6 months and shipped the car back to the States. All the import paperwork, the sales receipt from the car, all in the glove box. But he had it in his office. But he gave it to me.
So on that car, that guy did a European delivery. So back in the 60s, you could buy a car from Volkswagen and you would do a European delivery, which means you'd fly to Europe, you'd pick the car up, you'd go cruise around Europe, check a bunch of stuff out, and then you'd fly back home and they'd ship the car to you.
Most common is like military would buy cars and drive them around. This guy was from a missionary, but he was still there. He just bought the car from the factory, February 3rd, 1964, drove it around Germany until August 16th, 1964, and then had it sent to the States. And then it got picked up, to the best that we know, is the guy probably had just passed away because the car got picked up, for, unpaid tickets. And that's how Chris ended up with the car.
Bought it at an auction. He got it from an auction, like a police auction, impound auction or something?
Well, impound. Because I had to do a lien on the car, to get it into my name. And it was, and it was all painless. But just the fact that, as rough as the car was, because I used 5 donor cars to put the car together.
How straight was the body?
It was a 7-year project.
I mean, that thing was a massive labor of love, right? I mean, that thing just took nothing but tons and tons of time to build that car, right?
Well, it was all about the parts chase. The whole time, chased down parts.
It had, was it a fairly complete car when you got it, but you just wanted new replacement NOS stuff? Or was there a ton of stuff missing? You thought, instead of buying repro, I'm buying NOS, original, everything?
Yeah, I mean, it was a complete car. It was missing some, like a typical early Type 3 dash. It was there, early one with ears and, and your plastic garniture and the top door panels. That stuff was there, but, typical warped, stained, beat to crap, self-tapping screws run through the moldings, hold them on the doors, that kind of stuff.
Now, that car had towel bars on the bumpers, yeah?
Yeah, oh yeah.
So now, what's the story on towel bars? You're my Type 3 guy, man. I'm going to start peppering you with some Type 3 questions. What's the story? Those were dealer accessories, or they were what's the story?
Dealer accessories. As far as, accessories that I put on the car would have been the guards and the overlayers. So that was, it's either dealer installed or owner installed. You wouldn't get it out. You wouldn't get it off the, off the production line like that.
Right. So all towel bars were never factory installed.
Never factory installed. Dealer or owner.
It was a U.S. option. It was a U.S. option, or it was Europe option.
It's dealer option. Dealer option. Doesn't matter whether it's U.S. Or out of the country. Just dealer option. Just a dealer.
Now they're repopping those. I'm looking at the car right now, and it looks like the car sold for $24,000 back in November of 2018 on Barrett Jackson's website. Now, you had an Impy Easy Go shifter in there, or is that GTV shifter?
When I built the car, I put an eliminator shifter in it. Yeah, and because I know about the car. There's actual, we can close the story on this car because the unfortunate thing is that car doesn't exist anymore.
So this car's not around anymore?
Nope.
So I'm looking at, for our listeners so we're going to get to that in just a second. So for our listeners, I just searched Bob Lacoste's squareback is what I searched. And I saw a thread on the Samba. When I saw the thread on the Samba, I clicked on it, and then there was a link to Barrett Jackson. I'm looking at all the pictures of this beautiful black squareback that this thing is unbelievably detailed, top, bottom, inside and out. Now, you're telling me, I'm looking at the pictures, right? Mm-hmm. You're telling me the seats came this way, two-toned like this?
Yes.
The split is down on the lower third of the seat like that, huh?
Supposed to.
Is that when?
Height of the armrest.
When did they change that? Because that's that's an early car thing?
Well, now, the interior combo would depend on where the car was going, but for a general reference, up to 65 would have had a two-tone seat on it.
Okay.
Still, but it depends on where the destination of the car was, because you see some of the Type 3s that have like stripe kind of seat material on it, like early Summer 4 Bug was also available on Type 3s, and it was solid. It wouldn't have been cut off to, where the backrest was up.
So school me on some Type 3s here real quick. So on Type 3s, are you saying, like, did you have more selectability of more finite options on a Type 3 because it was like their new upcoming model? Like this was their step up from the Bug. So did the dealerships offer more accessories or more customizability on these cars, on the Type 3s and the Type 1s?
You're a Type 3 guy.
Yeah.
Bottom line is, and because I was spoiled, it was my very first car. And
Yeah.
anyone will agree, either Type 3s or bay windows have the best suspension Volkswagen ever created. They're the best
Oh, yeah.
cars. They're the best riding cars, stock or lowered.
And so what kind of lengths did you have to go through to find all the NOS parts for this car?
Well, 7 years. I mean, from
What was the hardest part to find?
the seat recliners.
So those are Huel seat recliners on there? And those are Type 3 specific NOS.
Type 3 only, left and right.
Now, will those seat recliners work on the Type 34 Gia? I don't think they'll work on the Type 34 Gia, will they?
Nope.
So Type 34 Gia is completely different. So those seat recliners.
They're even
So
different.
you probably it looks like you had the accelerator pedal cover.
It's Cami gas pedal.
So the Cami gas pedals for what?
With the footrest. It was all about the footrest.
Oh yeah, no, I'm checking it out, man. And you had the chrome turn signal cover.
And it's a real one, not a repop, because they didn't make them when I got that. But it was like, I'd never seen it. I was at Phoenix at a drag races and car show, meeting with somebody out there doing a car swap, and did the swap meet section. Like, oh, this is cool. How much? $2. Give it to me.
And that's a one-time use type deal. Once you bend the tabs on that, it's kind of done, right? You're not going to bend them multiple times.
Yeah, well, I had it re-chromed, so I actually, I had the tabs repaired, and then I had it re-chromed.
Yeah.
But
And then the 5 spokes on it.
the whole ignition column,
Uh-huh.
it's the whole thing individually, but it's all with all NOS parts.
Yeah, I bought one for my Type 34 Gia, an NOS Type 3 steering column, only to send it to Buddy to have him blow it completely apart, rip everything out of it, and paint it. So I don't know why I bought an NOS one, but it was there. I think I was just with that car was there. So on this car, the 5 spokes, original MP 5 spokes 2-piece. So those were aftermarket types.
Yeah,
Aftermarket, the 5 spokes.
MP5 spokes, but they were completely polished and chromed through the backside.
Yeah.
I personally was involved in even dealing with all the chrome on the car. Yeah. The rims actually, all in all, have 12 and a half hours of copper before they went in. So if you'll go in for an hour in copper, pull it out, cut it down, back into copper, cut it down, back into copper, 12 times.
You had a buddy at the chrome shop or what?
Sure did. Sure did.
Now, mud flaps and flat lenses. So flat lenses are Europe only. This car being built a European delivery, this car would have came with flat lenses, right? But you have all the American ones on there with the red lenses.
But
And
bigger style light for, brighter illumination.
yeah,
US spec squareback is a 1500, an import is a variant. And variants have side markers, 1500 does not.
and then tell me about the mud flaps. Mud flaps that's got VW mud flaps on there.
Mm-hmm.
They have, what's the difference between the VW mud flaps, the ones with the sergeant badge marks on them?
Just option. But, I have found it in my travels, getting them with the VW logos is harder than finding the sergeant stripes.
Really? Well, I know there was a 62 squareback when I was on my infamous trip to find, when I had stumbled across the Bull Run bus, that trip that I took from Vegas to Reno, I had found that someone drugged back to Vegas a 62 squareback, wide 5 push button dash, and it sat out there in the field with flat lenses, with the sergeant badge mud flaps, and it It was a white squareback, and I'm not quite sure what happened to that car. I know it had some rust on. I mean, had some rust for us guys from the West Coast, because East Coast guys would have said no rust, but for me it seemed pretty rusty. But so now this car was your labor of love for 7 years. After this car sold, what happened to this car?
It went just a real quick, short stint. It went to Canyon Country here in SoCal. And the owner decided, to let it go, so it went back up for sale. Then it was bought by Gunther VW in Coconut Creek, Florida, which it is where the 57 Horizon Blue convertible is still there. So, and the squareback sat there the whole entire time up until it went up for sale this past November and went through the auction. But the sad story is because, it went through no reserve. It was given away. And Russell Ritchie ended up, caught wind of it, buying the car. But at that point, when it got put onto a car carrier for transport, the car came off the back of the trailer.
The back of the trailer. So is it on an open trailer?
In transport, it came off the trailer and hit the ground and basically destroyed the car.
So it hit the ground rear bumper first.
All bumpers, straight through the fenders, bumper bracket. The roof got buckled.
Wow, that's insane.
Yeah.
So
ours, it's a glorified parts car now. Got a lot of good shit on it, but a lot of shit went up. The bumpers, the whole bumper assembly, bumper brackets down to the carriage bolts, all of it was in on us.
Wow. And so that car, how did you catch wind of all this happening to that car?
Randy Carlson.
So Randy told you what happened to the car, and then it broke you. Obviously, that's got to be pretty.
He hit me up out of nowhere, like, hey, what magazines was your car featured in? So I already knew something was going on. So I called him, like, why are you so curious?
Right.
Like, I haven't had that car in over 10 years. And then,
no, that's insane.
That's when I heard about all of it. And then I saw pictures of the car. He forwarded everything to me.
Oh, so you've seen pictures of this car. So you'll give me some of those pictures of that car destroyed.
They wanted to send the car here to the compound for us to give an estimate for the damage.
Really?
Yeah. And I made it real quick and simple. I said, what did you pay for the car? And they said, $38,000. I said, there's $38,000 in damage.
Yeah.
You can't fix the car. It's toast.
Yeah. Well, when you buckle the roof, I mean, that's a whole nother ball game, Wow. So you'll send me those pictures so our listeners can go on our blog that we'll send the blog out when this podcast comes out, and they'll be able to look at the pictures of this car. So that's a rough story, Bob. I mean, you have your car, you put all the time, effort, and energy into it, building that car, and then the end of the story is, the final time that car gets sold, it just falls off a trailer and gets completely totaled. So how'd that make you feel hearing about that car getting completely damaged?
It was heartbreaking.
Yeah.
It was heartbreaking. It really was. Yeah, I mean, it's like, when you send the kid off to school or off to college, they're gone and they're going to do their own thing, but they're your child. So it's just a car, but us car guys get it. And, those who understand.
Absolutely. So what's next for you, Bob? You have any cars on the burner that you got coming up?
56 ragtop.
So you got a 56 ragtop for yourself, and you're planning on going no holds barred on that, dude, mega detailed?
I want to go racing. Yeah, I want to go down the track. Personal cars, that's gonna be next for me. I want to do a race.
Well, fantastic, man. So, Bob, along the way, where you're at, and all the stuff, I know we talked about some people that have kind of been there for you throughout the VW scene. Who are those people that have been there that you want to give a shout out to on the podcast?
Well, first and foremost, the compound. Pip. The hammer here, the three of us, we do what we do and try to make our shit happen.
It's a good
I barely enjoy
to be a part of.
First and foremost, I mean, that's why I'm here. So definitely a shout out to those guys. and all the DBK members. But in general, I'm, personal shout outs. I mean, Gary Berg, personal friend of mine. He's been there for me. And I don't want to insult anybody if I don't mention names, because I could go, like I said, I could go on and on and on. But, Gary, at Ron Loomis Racing, Ron Fleming, Rich Kimball, Dave Griner, Performance, Eddie and Dave's Garage, again, super, close friend. A shout out to Hot VW Magazine, both Shins. Thank you for saving the magazine.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And then you had something about a double cab you wanted to talk about.
My buddy Frank, I had 42-year friendship. My longest, closest friend that I've ever had, passed away this past January, or actually February 2nd of this year. And so we've had a crew cab in the mix going on for quite some time. We're talking, no joke, 20 years.
Yeah.
But the ball's in my court now because, he's left us. And so, I'm going to follow that through for him and complete it. And, because it was supposed to, I think we talked about that earlier about when I did my square back and debuted it. It was supposed to be the crew cab and my square back, lined up, 2 black cars dressed in chrome. I did mine. This one didn't get done, but it will get done.
Well, cool. So we'll look forward to you putting that product out.
Frank Martin, the king of chrome.
All right, cool, man. Well, and Frank was your buddy that passed away.
Yeah, rest in peace, my brother. He finished off at Artistic Silver Plating in Signal Hill. I used to work with him. I used to work in chrome plating at once upon a time. But he's done it for, that's what he did. That's what he did. And he was the best at it. All the chrome plating on our cars was done by Frank.
Well, rest in peace, Frank, man. And, Bob, I appreciate you coming on the podcast with us for such a while. And I'm sure the next time you got something coming out of the chute, we'll be there to talk to you and kind of get you on here and get your info on it. I appreciate everything you do. Appreciate all the hard work that you do. It really shows in everything that you do. And I encourage everybody that when the cars are out there debuted, track down Bob. He's out there and he can give you a lot of the backstory on some of the cars and a lot of the extra, maybe point out some of that extra detail that people don't see, right? Well, cool, man. Well, thanks again for coming on the podcast, man. I appreciate it. And I'm sure we'll see you at the next show.
Bill, thank you, brother.
Well, hopefully you guys enjoyed that podcast as much as I did. It was definitely good to listen to it again and realize how much history Bob's had in the scene and what influence he had with a lot of stuff. And the breadth of knowledge that Bob had, man, was huge. So he'll definitely be missed, man. And my understanding is at the Featherly Park show, they're going to do a thing Saturday night, kind of a tribute to Bob. So look forward to seeing if I can make it down to that. So anyway, guys, we're going to wrap it up easy on this one, guys. And shout out to my boy Bob. Rest in peace. Later.
You probably don't know that there's a new Volkswagen out that doesn't look like a Volkswagen. It's got everything that people who like the bug like.